Hello again, it's Scott Arthur here. Welcome to Class 9 of D21UD, Urban Drainage and Water Supply. And the class this week is about groundwater as a water resource. So in Scotland, groundwater is not used significantly as a water supply source. So we tend to overlook it, but elsewhere in the world it's used quite widely, and it's actually often the mainstay of water supply in many communities. There is significant issues though to do with the pollution of groundwater and also the rates at which it's been abstracted and whether or not those are sustainable. So groundwater is water that comes from the ground, the clue is in the name. Groundwater comes from rain, snow, sleet, hail, and that infiltrates the ground, passes between particles of soil, sand, gravel or rock until it reaches a depth where the ground is saturated with water. The top of this is the saturated zone. This saturated zone is called the water table. Okay, so I think we're all familiar with that. So groundwater includes soil moisture, mobile water, and very low permeability rock and deep geothermal or oil formation water. Groundwater is believed to provide lubrication and possibly influence the movement of faults. This can be an issue below reservoirs as they fill, where you can get some tremors. So an area which holds a lot of water can be pumped up with a well. That can be pumped up with a well is called an aquifer. Wells pump groundwater from an aquifer and then pipes deliver the water to treatment or use. Most groundwater is clean, but it can become polluted from leaking chemical stores, landfills, or where too much fertiliser or pesticide is used. So here's quite a simple example of where the groundwater is being contaminated, obviously quite a small scale. In a much larger scale, perhaps it's more concerning to the community at large. We spoke previously about how, in the water supply class, about how we have to be quite careful where the ground was contaminated, when we're allowing infiltration of rainwater, because that can mobilise those pollutants. Particularly where you've got quite an active flow of water below ground. I came across this diagram. It's quite interesting. It summarises some of the issues to do with fracking. So here we've got the well coming down. We've got the fracking happening down here, and it's idealised here. It shows how that could lead to contamination of the surface waters. The paper this is from is quite an interesting review of some of the issues associated with fracking, and I've provided that on Vision for you. This is another example. This is a lagoon which was used to store contaminated water from an industrial process. Below the lagoon was an aquifer, and the lagoon managed to connect to the aquifer via a sinkhole, leaking out some 980 million litres of water into an aquifer which is used for consumption. Some 2 years to fully fix that problem, and obviously quite concerning if you're somebody who uses groundwater in your water supply. After a bit of searching, I found that the same area had been the focus of a really similar incident in 1994. So it's one of these situations where it seems that history is repeating itself, and it's these kinds of incidents, that can have significant impact on groundwater quality and also people's trust of it. Confined aquifer is one which is overlain by a relatively impermeable layer of rock or substrate. In a confined aquifer, if a confined aquifer follows a downward grade from its recharge zone, Groundwater can become pressurized as it flows. This can create artesian wells. So here we go. So it's filling up here. Water is then going down below a confining section of geology, and because of the height of water, it becomes pressurized, and where it can punch through the geology, you end up with an artesian well. Quite an interesting phenomenon. Aquifer characteristics. Horizontal transmissivity is the rate at which groundwater flows horizontally under a hydraulic gradient, and storage coefficient is the volume of water released from an aquifer per unit fall in the water table. For confined aquifer, it's a proportion of the unit volume which must be drained to reduce the head by a unit piezometric head. So the rock formations which the water flows through or is confined by is quite important. So rock types which can hold water quite easily is chalk, limestone, sandstone. Limestone and chalks are a great source of groundwater supplies in the south of England. Rock types which can stop the movement of water if they're not fractured is granite, basalt, mudstone. The sediments or sedimentary rocks, the transmissivity depends on the grain size and also the degree of consolidation, and also how the pores within that matrix, how they're connected. Fracturing also has a significant impact. So one of the problems we have is water near the surface can get polluted. Deeper water is expensive to extract. Some of it's quite old as well, so perhaps not renewable. Many deeper groundwater resources are becoming polluted as pollutants move from the surface into the subsurface. Over abstraction can lead to depletion, and saltwater intrusion is an issue in coastal areas. So if you have a coastal area, so here's the coast, and we've got the sea, somewhere below the land is probably a line where saltwater and freshwater meets. Saltwater, freshwater. But if you've got over abstraction, so there's a well, there's a water going out. If you've got over abstraction, that can lead to the boundary line slowly moving towards your extraction point, and eventually you start extracting salt water, which is not great for making tea with, to be honest. So this diagram here sums up some of those problems, the sort of range of pollutants which may be an issue to groundwater. Abstraction works. Boreholes can be shallow or deep. They are screened to prevent ingress of finer particles or surface water. Abstraction wells, these are larger but tend to be larger diameter, but tend to be shallower, and they can have boreholes drilled in their base and horizontal chambers. Horizontal chambers, so where you have a field well, you've got the horizontal chambers below ground. Here you've got a river, you've got your groundwater level here, and what you're doing is you're basically in this zone here. You may have sands and gravels, so you're drawing the river water basically through the sand and gravel into your abstraction well. The sand and gravel is acting as a filter. You've got it in your well, you take it to the surface, and this kind of setup is often where cheap bottled water comes from, because it's quite an inexpensive way of getting water from the natural environment. You could still say it's spring water or whatever. Got to be very aware of how groundwater can change with time. Apologies for the text in the middle there. So at the initial setup, you've got a known groundwater level. You begin abstracting groundwater for your purposes. You end up with your cone of depression. If you then over abstract, it can leave the secondary well there above your cone of depression, so that well runs dry, and that's not an unusual problem. Test pumping, you need to assess the impact of pumping on that cone of depression, so it's important that you do run some tests to understand the rate at which you could abstract water, also to undertake basic water quality tests as well, and also understand the rate at which it will be replenished. So that was really just a quick overview of groundwater. I realise it's relatively short, but hopefully it's got you interested in the subject, and I encourage you to read a little bit more about it. Okay, as ever, if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Bye for now.